mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic.
Hey everybody, welcome back to One Mic, where I watch shit so you don't have to. And today I'm here to talk about Season 1, Episodes 1, 2, and 3 of the new Peacock series, Bel-Air. I have a, I don't want to say a unique relationship with this show. I doubt it's very unique at all. But for me, it's super personal because Fresh Prince is one of my all-time favorite shows. Will Smith as a rapper and as an actor is one of my favorite people. So I was a little hesitant to even watch this show, but how could I not? I already have a great deal of love in my heart for the Fresh Prince as a series. So why would I not give this serious take on the show a chance? And that's what this is. It's a serious take, but with the same concept. So if you're unfamiliar for whatever reason and you're still watching this video, the Fresh Prince is about loosely based on Will Smith's life, but Will, he's also named Will Smith on the show, grows up in Philly, gets into a fight on a basketball court, and because of his, inability to behave, he's sent out to Bel-Air to live with his rich aunt and uncle, and the whole rest of the show is basically like a fish out of water story, like a dude from the hood that's growing up around like bougie people, but they're still black people. So this new show, Bel-Air, kind of takes it does that exact same thing, but with a more serious feel to it. And what makes this show, kind of difficult for me to watch is the fact that it constantly reminds me that it's based on Fresh Prince, but it's not Fresh Prince. Like, you have all the same characters there: Will Smith, Uncle Phil, Aunt Viv, Hillary, Carlton, Ashley, Jeffrey, Jazz, all those same people. But they all play very different roles. And in a lot of those cases, I actually think that they chose some pretty good directions for some of these characters. Like Hillary, for instance, is a she's a social media influencer, of course. Who wouldn't be, right, in 2022? But she also has a passion for cooking, which is different than was actually the complete opposite from Hillary Banks from Fresh Prince. In these first 3 episodes, we haven't seen very much of Ashley. So I couldn't even really tell you what she's like. I think she's had a very small handful of scenes. Aunt Viv and Uncle Phil are pretty much the same. Aunt Viv is still Will's biggest supporter. Uncle Phil is still hard on him, but expects a lot of him. Jeffrey is another one that we haven't spent a lot of time with. I think he's probably only got like 2 or 3 scenes in these first 3 episodes so far. So I don't know too much about Jeffrey. And then Carlton is where I think this show makes its biggest change, but also takes the most interesting direction. So Carlton in the original series was what we called back then an Oreo, somebody who's black on the outside but white on the inside. And this is what we called dudes back then, who and when I say we call dudes, I mean black people. I don't mean myself. I got called Oreo because I'm mixed, and then I always spoke proper. I got good grades, all that good stuff. So I was always called an Oreo. Actually, Oreo would have been nice compared to what I was actually called. But that was how they did Carlton on the show, and they did it with kind of like with a comedic flair, like haha, look how white this black guy acts. This show takes that same concept, but places it in a world now where you deal with stuff like cultural appropriation, use of the N-word, things like that, and it makes it less dated than it is currently on the Fresh Prince show. Like, not currently, it doesn't air, but like if we looked at what was to be considered a quote unquote Oreo in the 90s, that would look dated here in 2022. But what they've done with Carlton in this version is they've taken that same concept but put it into modern times, and I found that to be pretty interesting. It's an interesting, especially when you look at the fact that the show is serious. It's interesting to create that conflict when the stakes are much higher. Like on the original show, it's just jokes and whatnot, but on here, I don't want to spoil too much about Carlton because I feel like Carlton's character is probably the most interesting to see evolve, and will be the most interesting to see evolve throughout the course of the show. But I also wonder how long you can play out this kind of storyline with Carlton's character or this character arc if you plan on having the show run multiple seasons. Because the whole Oreo thing was just like a part of who Carlton was on The Fresh Prince. This whole idea of him being a black guy who's like cool with white guys saying the N-word and all this kind of stuff, that's who he is right now. And he needs to be a little bit more than that. Carlton had a whole lot of things that were interesting about him on the original series. So they kind of need to expand that a little bit, give him a little bit more character if they want to have this show run long term. But as of right now, Carlton is probably the most interesting character on the show, which is of course a good thing. And I've enjoyed watching what they've done with that character. But before I move on to other aspects of the show, I also want to point out that a lot of the characters that we have seen throughout the course of the series have already shown up in these first 3 episodes. So Will's best friend in Philly is named Trey. Ice Trey was on the original series. He was played by Don Cheadle. Everybody who's on the original series is like a fucking legend now. But they weren't a huge deal at that time, most of them. We've already met Lisa and Fred Wilkes, which is interesting because the original series doesn't even introduce Lisa as a character played by Nia Long until, I don't know, season 3, season 4, something like that. And her dad, Fred Wilkes, was played by John Amos. They introduced both of those characters in the first episode, which I find that to be interesting as well. So a lot of the names that you might have seen in the original series, you're going to see here. So I found that to be, again, I like it, but I don't. Because I keep seeing these people and I keep hearing these names and it keeps making me think of the people from the original series, but they're so wildly different on here that it's a weird place for me to be kind of like stuck in the middle of nostalgia and something that is wildly different from what I'm nostalgic for. And that's kind of been my struggle. Plus, at times, the show seems very, I don't want to say like network TV, like some CW type shit, but it kind of does feel that way, just with like a whole lot of like bad language. And that's pretty much it. But another thing the show, something else that the show does well, I think, is taking a lot of the aspects of the original series and bringing them into modern times, just like what they're doing with Carlton. So like, for instance, and this is another thing that I float back and forth between whether or not I like it or whether or not it's troublesome to me. But they use slang on this show really, really heavy, to the point where it's very noticeable. And it's largely Philly slang, which is a good thing because that makes the show feel authentic. But the slang on the show, like when I'm taking my notes, I'm sitting here like it feels like I'm like listening to a Twitter feed. Like all they talk in is like memes and popular pop culture phrases. And trust me, this isn't me being like an old fogey. Like I still talk like, I'm by no means out here fucking like talking like a Cambridge professor or something. But when it's noticeable to me like that, I feel like that's kind of a bad thing. But then, on the other hand, I look back at the original series, and the original series was just as heavy with the slang, if not more so, than this show is. But since I was a teenager at the time, and that was how how people talked, and you're listening to hip hop starting to become its thing coming to its own at that time, and it didn't stand out to me because that's just how it was. And I think that's kind of how what I'm failing to. Or obviously, I'm not failing to grasp it because I'm talking about it, but I think that's what kind of is throwing me a little bit, in that I'm not as in touch with the way a 17-year-old to early 20s, I'm not as in touch with how they may talk now. So when I hear it, it doesn't sound like people having a real conversation. It just sounds like I said, it sounds like somebody's reading a Twitter feed or something. And that's, again, at times off-putting, but then at the same time, I have to let go of the idea that this is Fresh Prince, which the show makes it hard for me to do. But I feel like if I had not watched the original series at all, or I didn't like it as much as I do, love it as much as I do, I'd probably be enjoying this show a little bit more. Now, this is by no means me not recommending the show. Like I said, I like what they're doing with Carlton's character. I like what they're doing with Hillary's character. Phil, I think, is nowhere near at this point as likable as James Avery, but how could you be? But I think they're actually doing some work with him too. So what I mean by that is, Uncle Phil was an established, full-grown adult who was very wise, very fatherly. He was polished. I feel like Phil on this show is not quite polished yet. Like he's like new money kind of. Like he I don't know if that's true or not, but that's how it feels. It feels like Phil has a lot of growing to do on this show, whereas he didn't really have too much growing to do on the original series. They had a couple of episodes where Uncle Phil learns a lesson or something like that, but by and large, he was pretty polished. So seeing an evolution for Phil on this show intrigues me as well, because he's immediately almost kind of like trying to send Will back, looking for any excuse to do so. Whereas Phil on the original show was always very accepting of Will being there. He just irritated him. So I like the idea of seeing Phil progress. We still need to learn about Ashley. We still need to learn about Jeffrey. We never see Jazz. I don't know if I even really want to see Jazz, if that makes sense, because like I said, my connection to the original series is so strong, and I don't look at Will and Jazz as two characters from a TV show. Like, for one, these are real friends. Like, these are real people. I already knew Will and Jazz before the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air TV show was a thing. They were already a pair. They were already friends. So this was like something that you could look at and aspire to. Like these two guys who are really friends in real life, who have been making Grammy-winning albums already, are now crushing it on this NBC TV show. This doesn't have any of that. How could it? So, yeah, we haven't seen Jazz too much, but I'm not sure I really need to necessarily, because it's not the same. And there's going to be certain things where I'm going to go, it's not the same, and then immediately acknowledge that it's not supposed to be the same. I don't want them to force a Will and Jazz dynamic that's similar to the Will and Jazz dynamic from the original series. But what they are doing, which I do find interesting, is it looks like they're forming kind of like a Will and Jazz dynamic with a white character at Will's school, which I find that to be pretty interesting. So, and his name's not Kellogg Lieberbaum either. I was like, please let this be Cornflake, but it's not Cornflake. So before I wrap up, there are a couple things that, there's stuff that I like about the show. There's stuff that just kind of makes me feel like, I don't know how I feel about this. But then there are some things that I flat out don't like. One of those mainly being, like I said, it feels kind of like, just in the nature of the production, the nature of the acting, the way it's shot, a lot of it feels very network TV. It doesn't feel very, I don't want to say high class. It makes me sound bougie. But like, it doesn't feel like the best production in the world. It feels very CW, just with strong language. But, okay, so I'm going to give you an idea of why I say it feels like network TV. There's a scene in, I think, the second episode where we find out that Trey gets shot. And Will tells Vivian, Trey got shot. They don't know if he's going to make it. And then they go, and she hugs him. And then Peacock throws on a 45-second commercial. So it's kind of like a cliffhanger that you have before a commercial. They come back from the commercial, and I don't know if it's immediately or maybe like a few minutes later, it's like, oh yeah, the bullet went in and out of his shoulder, he's fine. So you blatantly went for the emotional moment before a commercial, and then immediately following the commercial, throw that away. So it was like a blatant, just emotional grab that was, one, not even worth going for, but two, like, you just undermined what happened 2 minutes ago. For what reason? Just to give a fake cliffhanger before a 45-second ad? Like, I that was confusing to me. And then there's another scene where Phil goes on Big Boy's show, and if you don't know who Big Boy is, I'm not about to explain it to you, but Big Boy's a famous radio host. And he goes on Big Boy's show, and this whole show scene is cringeworthy in how unrealistic it is. And the whole idea is they want to paint Phil, and they did the same thing on the original series. They wanted to paint Phil as someone who is too out of touch. He's too rich. He's too closed off in Bel-Air. He's forgotten where he's come from. He doesn't know what's going on in the streets. They chose to convey this by having Big Boy and like 5 callers into the show ask him about how big his house was, how much he paid for it, how much he made. Like, it was like, there was no effort. Like, there was not a deft hand used in writing a scene in which they wanted to make the point that Phil is out of touch. It was like, what's the clumsiest way we can do this? And then that was the scene. Like, it was cringe bad. It's probably like the worst scene that I've seen in the 3 episodes, where I was just like, this is terrible. Like, I don't know why like, this is so clumsy. But there's another scene where, and a lot of the scenes that I don't like are like very heavy-handed, kind of like, look at this racial inequity, or look at this difference between black people and white people, or between rich people and poor people. But it's like very clumsy and heavy-handed. Like, another one is, like I mentioned before, Hillary's like a cook, and she wants to work for this. It was called fuck. I can't remember what it was called, but I think it was like a magazine or something like that. Maybe it was a web show. I can't remember. Haute Cuisine. That was the name of it. But I don't think they ever actually were clear on what Haute Cuisine actually was. Like, if it was a website, if it was a YouTube channel, if it was a magazine, if it was a TV show, like, I don't know. But she wanted to be on that. And she gives her food to the 2 people who are interviewing her for this opportunity. And one of them even goes so far as to say, this was a little spicy. You might want to tone that down. I'm like, you mean to tell me we're going to do the white people don't like seasonings thing? Like white people don't properly season their food? We're going to do that on here this clumsily? And this I felt like there was like big giant neon arrows pointing at the screen and big words going something like, this is the difference between white people and black people. Arrows, arrows, arrows. Like, come on, man. Like, that's why I said it feels very network TV-like, because they make these points with like I said, it feels like there's big neon arrows pointing at the point, and it's not very deft, it's not very subtle, it's very just like overt and just like, look at this, look at this, look at this. And I would like a little bit more nuance in my displays of racism, or the differences between white and black people, or the differences between rich and poor people, or whatever. I thought that was I rolled my eyes. I'm not gonna lie. There's a couple of scenes where Will plays basketball that they feel like they were filmed weird. Like, there's one where he's trying out for the team, and they're playing kind of sort of full court, but they're playing it across the short end of the court. So like, they have baskets on the sides, and they're playing quote unquote full court. And you see Will like running past the actual like basket that should be, that they should be playing on if they're playing full court. And then like this, like the way it's shot is always just kind of weird. Like, they're trying to hide the fact that maybe a lot of these actors aren't very good at basketball. So maybe that's why they film it weird. But the basketball scenes are pretty poorly filmed, especially when you compare them to the basketball scenes from the original series, which, aside from the fact that the courts were clearly very small, they were pretty acceptably filmed scenes where you could at least tell what's going on and you could see everything pretty clearly. These basketball scenes are like very jumbled. And this isn't a flaw or a knock on it or anything, but I wrote Carlton looks jealous in my notes like 10 times throughout the course of these 3 episodes. And I guess maybe this is kind of a flaw. It wasn't like I'm noticing like, oh, Carlton looks jealous. No, they would have him looking pissed off, looking at Will, and zoom in on his face. And that's why I said like it feels so network television. Like, it's like, hey, in case you didn't notice that Carlton looks pissed off, let's zoom in real tight so you can see. And like, I don't know. It's just I just look at it like, okay, I get it. He's pissed off. Like, I got it the first 7 times you zoomed in on his face and showed him looking angry, that he was jealous of Will. I got it the first time. I didn't need the extra 6, and we're only through 3 episodes. If it's an 8-episode season, how many more times am I gonna be putting in my notes, Carlton looks jealous? So like I said, the show's doing some things that I think are pretty interesting. But again, by and large, I have my own personal struggles with separating this from the original series, which again, that's not that big of a deal, at least because I acknowledge it. I know that that's something that I'm dealing with. And I'm not just sitting up here shitting on the show, not noticing that I'm saying things that are just basically amount to it's different than the original series. I'm aware of that. But the stuff that I just read about these like really overt, like, hey, look at how racist this is, or look at how look at these different, how they like really shine a bright light and point big fingers at these things. That I think is indicative of kind of like your mid-level of television show, like the show that doesn't think their viewer is smart enough to pick up on these things with a little bit more subtlety. They gotta just make sure that they shove it in your face so that you don't miss it. And that kind of stuff irritates me. Like, don't treat me like I'm a stupid viewer and like I'm not going to be able to make this connection. Like, you don't have to linger on Carlton's face for 5 minutes looking angry for me to know he's jealous. Like, you don't even have to show me his face. You could have him be jealous through his actions or through, maybe things that he says or whatever. But, those kinds of things are a turnoff to me on this show. But I'm interested in Phil's growth. I'm interested in seeing what's happening with Hillary, because I think Hillary's one of the characters that I think they've kind of taken the opposite approach with, and they've made her very independent, very self-sufficient, very smart. They've done a lot of things with Hillary that I think are good when you compare them to when you compare her to the original Hillary. So I like what they're doing with Hillary. I like what they're doing with Carlton, despite the lingering shots on his face. I like what they're doing with Carlton. And then lastly, Will, the lead, I think that he does a pretty good job of conveying all the things that I think Will did great. Will, the actor, did great on the original series. Charming, he nails that. Swag, he nails that. He also nails kind of like there were times where like Will would be pissed off or sad, and the show went for this kind of like later in its run, but shows times where Will would look troubled. This actor does a great job with that face of like looking troubled or concerned, so he does great there. Humor, not even comparable, but again, this isn't a comedy, so I don't hold that against the actor. So I guess all that to say, I'm at 22 minutes. Wow, this is way longer than I thought it was going to be. I guess all that to say, I'm right now sitting in a place where I don't know if I'm interested in watching the whole series. I'm definitely going to watch the next episode. I'm going to give it some time. I'll probably still cover it here on this channel as well, and that will give me the opportunity to go a little bit more in depth, because I always like these first ones to be non-spoiler. So give me the time to go a little bit more in depth and give you my thoughts on very specific things about the show. And I can say, okay, this is bad, this is good, or whatever. And then after that, episode 4 is probably when I'll decide if it's something I'm going to continue covering, and if it's something I'm going to continue watching. And also, it's going to depend on how well the video does. I mean, if I post this video and it does good numbers, I'm going to fucking cover it regardless. So I guess we'll see. But I believe new episodes come out on Thursday, so I will see you guys probably Friday for a recap of episode 4, because I have the Peacemaker finale this Thursday and Raised by Wolves. Those kind of take precedence over that. The Peacemaker finale does. I might give episode 4 of Bel-Air precedence over Raised by Wolves. It kind of depends on how I'm feeling on Thursday, but we'll see. I'm rambling, so I'll wrap this up. I will see you guys Thursday or Friday for episode 4. Peace.